All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today and not being outside in this beautiful sunshine. I'm gonna go over at a really high level what our Soundkeeper program does with Save the Sound. And so the talk is a day in the life of Soundkeeper or a Soundkeeper. I change it to Soundkeeper because we're really a team, and Save the Sound has all the elements of a waterkeeper group. And all the keepers are a member of what's called the Waterkeeper Alliance. And we are people that defend water in various ways across the globe. We're in 44 countries now. So um, the way I choose to describe my day is protecting Long Island Sound. And then the way we do it is through a number of ways, but we improve habitats with underwater restoration as a long-term solution to the productivity of the sound. So I'm going to dig into this. Let's see if this advances. Space bar. Oh, I have to hit that. All right, hold on down here. So I have to start with the original Soundkeeper. This is Terry Backer. He was a legislator from 1993 to 2015. And he's the one that came up with the Long Island Soundkeeper as a concept. So he's the original. He was a lobster fisherman that ran into poor water quality in Long Island Sound that was affecting his business. And so he got together with a few other people and they formed what's called the Waterkeeper Alliance. You can see their logo in the upper right-hand corner. It's a sturgeon is our logo. And on the right-hand side, you can see how terrible the water quality in the sound. The black color is zero oxygen. So anybody fishing in those areas for lobster or Manhattan was seeing lots of dead animals. And this was because of all of the semi or unregulated sewage or the violations of the Clean Water Act that were really polluting Long Island Sound. And this map's from 2003. So Terry got together with people from San Francisco, people from the Hudson River. The Hudson River keeper was the first keeper, and 8 founding members said we need to do something about this as citizens. So what a sound keeper is a private citizen that represents their body of water, whether it's a sound, a river, a lake. You have an interest in that water being swimmable, fishable, and drinkable. And that is the basics for what we do. And we started off with a old boat that was a free hand-me-down that needed a lot of work. That's the one on the upper left. That's the Terry Backer one. These are all named after Terry Backer. We actually we have 4 of them right now. And the one I use is in the right-hand side. It's out all year. That's why I show it in snow. The one on the lower left is actually in Long Island now. That's being used by one of our partners. And then the one in the lower bottom is our newest boat. And I want to take this moment to recognize our team members. So the Soundkeeper team, there's 2 of us. So Nico in the upper right, he is our eelgrass lobster pot guru. He's been helping with water quality and running our lobster pot retrieval program, which I'll go over in a little bit. And then our newest member is Allison. And Allison is comes to us with a tremendous amount of scientific experience and a tremendous amount of boat experience. That's really hard to find as a PhD level scientist that can drive a boat and has a lot of practical knowledge. So she's been a huge asset to the team. And as you know, Long Island Sound's huge. So now we can start breaking apart Long Island Sound, where Allison's more focused in New York down in the Narrows, and I'm out in Port Jeff, Bridgeport, all the way out to Plum Island and Watch Hill, and we're doing patrols. And we also, at the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit about our campaign. We're looking to try and get somebody over on Long Island as well, so we can respond to problems in Long Island Sound rapidly. So this is the bread and butter of what a Soundkeeper does. And it's a day in the life of Soundkeeper. there's really no way to describe that because it's different every single day. You have no idea what's going to come at you. We'll get a report of a sewage smell. We'll run out and test a culvert, and we'll take that sample to one of our labs and look for evidence of sewage. And if we find it, then we contact a local municipality. Or in the center photo there, that's Lauren Mappa. She runs the two biggest sewage treatment plants in the state out of Bridgeport, east and west side. And she does a fantastic job with these old plants, keeping them going. But when we have issues, I can call her up and she will respond immediately. She's been a tremendous advocate of clean water as a sewage plant operator engineer. And that's one thing I will say is, yes, we do have sewage problems, but the unsung heroes of Long Island Sound are all the sewage treatment plant operators. They work every day to deal with our waste and keep it clean and under the regulations of the Clean Water Act. Now, if those regulations aren't followed, the lower left are a couple of examples of our lawyers, and we will go to court and we will enforce the Clean Water Act. That is one trademark of Soundkeeper programs all over the place, is that we reserve the right as citizens and under the citizen provision of the Clean Water Act to defend our water. If someone's polluting my water, I, as a U.S. citizen, have a right to defend that right, that situation. And then there's all kinds of other pollutants I won't go into. The photo on the right is a PFAS spill. Um, we're dealing with tire runoff, all kinds of plastics, that type of thing. I don't have time to go into all of it, but at the bottom here, if anybody sees any kind of pollution, any dumping, sees any spills, smells anything off-putting, please email us at pollution@savethesound. That goes to a number of us, and we will respond as soon as we can and determine if we should send someone out to sample. And that makes you a watchdog. So my real watchdog is the one on the left. That's my black lab, Jackie, and she goes out on the boat with me frequently. She smells sewage sometimes. She's very attentive to what's going on with everybody around her. But we get all kinds of calls. Last year, there was a big turtle die-off. There was, I think, close to a dozen or 19 terrapins that died in Black Rock Harbor. Nobody knew. So we collected those and sent them to the state for necropsy to try and determine what killed them. On the right, someone called in, saw somebody dumping tires off an exit 995. Those tires have a nasty chemical called 6-PPD quinone, which directly kills fish when it leaches into the water. So we were able to engage law enforcement. That person was caught and ticketed and forced to clean up the mess. And then there's an example, one of our long-term watchdogs, Dr. Mara. He led beach cleanup. So really, I guess the point of this is Soundkeeper is all of us. Where I might be a spokesperson, but really we don't function without everybody in New York and Connecticut that live within Long Island Sound helping us out. This is a collective problem. Pollution is all of us, and we need to help each other out. So another big project we're working on is mapping out all the pipes that flow into Long Island Sound, and we're partially through that. So in the future, when we get someone calling in saying, "Hey, I smell sewage," and they give us a location, we're going to know probably which pipe is broken and spewing sewage into the sound, and we can beeline right there, get our water samples, and take them to one of our labs. Our flagship lab is in Larchmont in Westchester County, and they have really good capability to test water down there. We have a pilot lab, smaller labs in Hamden, Clinton. There's another one up in Stonington, and we want to get one over on Long Island to more rapidly test problems. And you could see sometimes we have to launch kayaks if the water's too shallow to get to these pipes. So we all carry kayaks on our boats when we're out pollution sampling, and we'll anchor up and drop the kayak in and go get the water bottle. One of the ways we bring the community together to care about Long Island Sound, which again, it's a goal of a Soundkeeper, is to get everybody defending our water. It belongs to all of us. We give it voice. So these are locations that where we have citizen groups. We're well over 2 dozen now, and local groups adopt their local bay or harbor, and they go out for 6 months of the year and they sample every 2 weeks. And that gives us a very good idea of the conditions of that water. And so what we do with that information is we give them grades. And we come out with the Long Island Sound report card, and that will tell individual people how their bays and harbors are doing. The center sound is run by buoys that are interstate commissions and universities, state agencies involved, and those are large. If you've ever been out on the sound, seen those large yellow buoys, they're taking wave height, they're doing water quality sampling, and they're beaming all that back in. So those big blocks are based on that. All the little circles there, that's our work. That's Save the Sounds water quality team, and there are over 2 dozen volunteer groups out there sampling. And so we take that data and then we assign it a grade. And when we look at this data, we can see, I know where we need to start focusing our work maybe with more investigation, whether it's stormwater runoff or faulty sewage systems or broken septic tanks. If you have a red or an orange or even a yellow, we'll send our team out there and we'll start engaging the community and try and fix that problem. The one thing I will say, this is pretty good. If you look at the color out in the sound, if you did this back in 2003, the only really green part would be the far eastern. So over the last 20 years, both the states and the EPA have done a really good job, and all the sewage treatment plants, of upgrading their infrastructure, upgrading collection systems, upgrading pipes, filter systems. And so we've seen an increase of water quality as we have seen a decrease in nitrogen. Nitrogen's what causes that green pea soup out there, basically fertilizing the plankton. And so all the stormwater runoff from the fertilizers we put on our lawns, pet waste, and all the leaky sewage, that all goes into the sound. So we're doing a pretty good job. We just need to keep it going. And then the final tool that we use is the Long Island Sound Beach Report. Now, this is not our data. This is data generated from the EPA. So any place that has a publicly accessible beach, you are required by law, the Safe Beach Act, as a municipality or a state, to go out, water sample on a regular basis. And if you fail, you have to close the beach down. And so you could see the areas where we've had some failures in this beach report recent. It got a little rough last year. There were more closures than we had seen in the previous. Now those are localized. Those are localized problems. It may be a facility on a beach with toilets. We've seen this that have been leaking into the sand. It may be broken pipes along a sewer main that go out of a outfall, one of those pipes we're mapping, and you end up focusing on that and hopefully figuring out the problem and then cleaning it up. I have numbers of stories I'm willing to answer some questions on that some of you may know of situations in your backyard, but this is a very good response. We take this EPA data, we have an algorithm that runs it through some software, and then it displays it out. And you can click on these and get historical data all the way back several years, some of them as far as 2003, and how the water quality has gone up or down where you like to go swimming or fishing. Now I'm going to switch away from water quality, and I do a lot of work with fisheries. I was a commercial fisherman. I was a fisheries biologist. I love to fish myself for fun and food. So I have a lot of time in with the world of fish. And one of the iconic species in the Long Island Sound are river herring. We have several species. The river herring are blueback and alewife. We also have American shad and gizzard shad and hickory shad. These are all types of herring that run up the rivers. They take the nutrients from the ocean and they run up the rivers and they spawn and their young come out. And they're extremely important for all kinds of fish and birds and seals and whales. So we used to have millions of these fish running up our rivers, and through the Industrial Revolution, we dammed a lot of them off. Um, but what we are focusing on now is taking a lot of those dams down, and we have removed a lot of the dams, and we're increasing habitat every year almost for these fish to come back and spawn. Now, this graph depicts the counts at Mount Holyoke, which is a fish passage on the Connecticut River. And prior to 1976, we had all sorts of foreign countries off our coast, right on the shoreline, sweeping up our herring. My time in Alaska, Senator Ted Stevens was there at the time, and he combined his efforts with Magnuson. And the Stevenson-Magnuson Act was a congressional action that pushed all foreign fleets 200 miles offshore. And all the countries did that. It's called the economic exclusion zone. So all the countries all of a sudden became responsible for managing the fisheries 200 miles offshore. And when we did that in 1976, look what happened to the river herring. They went through the roof. So we know our fish were getting caught out there, or we highly suspect our fish were getting caught out there. And then getting into the 90s, our own domestic fleet came up with this technique called midwater trawling, where you stretch a football field long net between two boats. They can go down to 90 feet and they sweep up the schools of herring. Now, the problem with this is they were going for Atlantic herring, which are saltwater herring. But our river herring are very similar to those, and out at sea they school together. So you could see what happened once that fishery got going. Our runs just dropped right off. So I'm currently been appointed to the New England Fisheries Management Council by Governor Lamont. And one of the mandates I have from the fisheries folks here, the leadership in Connecticut, is to try and mitigate that bycatch at sea. And that's a whole nother slideshow I can go into at another time, but I'll give you a quick overview of what's going on. This map shows where there's a lot of herring fishing going on. So these areas are where they're going for Atlantic herring and likely catching a tremendous amount of our river herring. And there has been genetic data done on this, and indeed over 50% of the river herring that are caught in the commercial offshore fleets are Long Island Sound herring or Block Island Sound herring. So genetically, those fish, and you can see in that red circle, that's probably where they're catching them. So we really need to deal with that. Right now, the Atlantic herring population is overfished. So there's not a lot of bycatch going on, and preliminary data shows rapid increase in our river herring runs over the last couple of years, which is fantastic. So this is the genetic data that I was talking about. We tried a buffer zone to keep the boats out of those areas where our river herring are schooling before running up the river to spawn. But that was ultimately defeated in court. So we're trying some other policy and management methods to mitigate this problem. And I believe Representative Joe Gresco is on the call. He is also the legislative appointee to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission that actually manages this species. So he's been an integral part as well in trying to address this problem. Now I'm going to switch again. This is a really cool project that we've been working on. And in our logo, you see at the upper left, there's two little eelgrass by the fish. So we're trying to restore eelgrass. It's a very hard thing to do. We've lost over 90% of our eelgrass in Long Island Sound. Right now we're in the final stages of evaluating the seeds methods called seeds eelgrass attached to shellfish. This was a method that Rob Vasilith, who's from Long Island, came up with. He's been working on it for a number of years now. And essentially, what you do is you scuba dive, you harvest the reproductive shoots of eelgrass, you bring them to tanks, let the seeds fall out, you siphon up all the seeds, and then we have big volunteer events, which we have some going on this fall. They're almost full. I think the only openings now are in November, so check that out on our website. But we glue 5 to 10 seeds per clam. We bring them out onto the boat. You can see Rob's machine on a Cornell boat. That's a Cornell Cooperative out of New York, and that's Steve Schott. Or that's actually Rob in that one. Steve Schott's driving, and they run off a little conveyor belt and they just sprinkle. So as you drive the boat along, all these little seeded clams go down to the bottom and bury the seeds in so they can sprout. And we've done some test plots. We've got some germination. And here's a great drone picture of everybody scrambling around feeding clams into the machine. Um, and I'll talk about the experiment in a second, but this is a spot where we've been dumping clams for a couple of years with seeds. And you can see the eelgrass meadow on the left-hand side. Now there was some eelgrass there, so we can't scientifically say this is our work, but it looks a lot better since we started putting all the clams and the extra seeds in there. So that's, you can see the little Soundkeeper boat is the little boat on the left, right in the middle of that. And we're planting along both sides of this jetty now. That's what this is. You can see how sparse the eelgrass is. This is a drone image that goes down to really tight resolution. I can zoom way in and we can see individual clumps of eelgrass. So this year we're gonna put out 10,000 clams in each of those plots. Those plots are 100 meters by 20 meters with 100,000 seeds as our target on those. And if we have about a 3% germination rate, each of those plots should have 3,000 plants or so in it. And so when we refly this drone imagery, there should be bright green rectangles. And then we can say for sure that this is a viable method. We're going to publish a scientific paper, and then Rob, who came up with this method, will have it verified at this level, and he can run around and hopefully we start dumping clams everywhere around Long Island Sound, not to eat, but to help clean up the ground for eelgrass to thrive. The reason you want the clams is because they're little mini sewage treatment uh, plants. Each clam's filtering, bringing oxygen into the water, moving the nutrients around, and it creates ideal situation for the seeds to thrive. Because if you don't have them and there's a bunch of old sewage and sediment in there, it's full of hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic to eelgrass. It'll actually travel up into the vascular system and kill the plants. So stay tuned. We've got drone photos. We have high altitude aerial that was paid for by Fish and Wildlife Service. That's from a plane. We actually are working with Fisher's Island folks, the concert eelgrass people over there. They had extra money. We are going to have 3 satellite flights over this. We're going to have satellite imagery, airplane imagery. We're going to have drone imagery, and we're also going to have sonar imagery from Dave Hudson at Remote Ecologist has a little boat with a sonar imagery. So we're going to try and verify this multiple ways, and I'm really excited to see what happens next year. So we'll probably do a show just on that if it works really well. Um, and it really hinges on volunteers. So we have a number of sessions this fall. This is what we do. A bunch of people get together around a table, chit chat. We glue a bunch of seeds, then we take them right out on the boat and plant them. So it's a fun project and it's pretty popular. Okay, now I'm going to move into another habitat restoration, which is through cleanup. So back in the heyday in the 90s, there was a lot of lobster fishing going on. I myself fished out of Mount Sinai off of Long Island, and we were bringing in on average 800 pounds of lobsters a day. And there were people fishing everywhere. There were pots everywhere. We would come across abandoned pots every day. Someone would chop a buoy or a prop would cut it. You'd pull up a string of 6 or 7 lobster pots. They'd be full of tautog, big tautog, and we let them go and then get the pots out. But a lot of pots got lost because there was a lot of people fishing. There's natural loss. And then something happened and all the lobster died off. Things got warm, water quality went down. There's probably some nearshore effects of pesticides, and it got really warm. We are in a warming trend in Long Island Sound, and lobsters start to get stressed out when it's hot. That's why you don't see American lobsters in Florida. It's too hot for them. You see spiny lobsters. They're adapted for it. The lobsters we have like cold water. The peak lobster fishing now in America is on the Canadian border. The general Gulf of Maine peaked in 2016 and the lobsters are still moving north. So we are in the remnants of a awesome industry. It was a great industry for a long time for the fishermen here, and we've got the remains of it. So we have to clean these pots up, and the reason we do that is because they keep fishing. They are called ghost pots. And I've got a couple pictures of what we find in the pots after this, but I wanted to give a shout out to Joe because he helped pass the law that allowed us to go after these pots. Prior to this public act being passed, we were not able to go out and touch another person's lobster pot because back in the day, people were stealing pots. I knew a lot of lobstermen when I was a kid, and everybody was stealing each other's lobster. Not everybody, there were some bad actors out there. So they made it very clear you can touch your pot and the police can touch your pot. No one else can touch your pot or you're in deep trouble. And so we passed a law, since there aren't many people doing it, that if you have permission from the commissioner of Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, like we do at Save the Sound, we can go out, contract lobster fishermen, the few that are remaining, and they can work this recovery of these old abandoned pots. We grapple for them and we haul them up and get rid of them, recycle them. They get recycled for metal. Um, we can add to their business plan because they're fishing different species and having some of this contract money mixed into their fishing business can help, especially in the wintertime. So big shout out to Joe for that. Here's an example of a nasty old pot coming up. This is a commercial lobster boat we're working off of. We've done 83 trips. Nico is our lead on this, and he worked crazy hours last winter. He was out all last winter making sure we got our trips done. We're around 2,000 pots Save the Sound has gotten. I think on the Connecticut side, or over 3,000 now with our partners. The Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk, Project Oceanology, and of course over at Cornell handles all the cleanups on the New York side. So you can see some of the numbers that we pull out of here. There's all kinds of other creatures in there, but these are the commercially important ones. And here's a close-up of what we find in there. So you find lobsters. There's a beautiful pregnant lobster full of berries. There's a nice cod on the lower left. That's typically you find those in the winter. There's a picture of Nico down there. He's still going strong. We have a couple of interns from our internship program showing off spider crabs, and in the lower right, a porgy, and you could see black sea bass. This one with the two fish with the orange glove, that's a black sea bass and a tautog or a blackfish. And you could see the scales on that blackfish have been bitten off by the tautog. Tautog have these teeth, they like to crunch crabs. So, if you have a tautog and a black sea bass in the same pot, the tautog is going to win. But the point is, these fish are too big to get back out. The release systems that are supposed to be designed in it get mudded in, or coral grows over them, or sponges, and nothing can get out. So we pulled up one pot that was dated 1986. That's the year I graduated high school, and it had stuff in it. So you can think of all the years these pots are catching and things are not making it out. And they die, they rebait the pot. And then you can see this large lobster claw. We'll find that frequently. The thickest part of the lobster is that big crusher claw. So the ocean dissolves everything except that one claw. So we count that as a dead lobster. And then I want to kind of wrap this up with a mosaic because I just touched on a couple of things. Um, Save the Sound and the Soundkeeper program uses tremendous amount of tools to solve environmental problems. So there's court action. There's the environmental groups reach court-ordered settlement. We just closed with Westchester County on a big and a number of towns down there. Tremendous multi-year effort by our legal team and our water quality team to clean up thousands of broken, thousands of defects within the sewage treatment systems in Westchester County. Um, there's eelgrass experiments we did in Smithtown Bay. There's the lobster pot cleanup we do. We have an ecological restoration team, which is phenomenal. They have done marsh restoration over here in this location. We do green infrastructure. So we take things like the nasty old parking lot that was there in Sunken Meadow State Park. There's another one we're trying to work on in Rye Playland. If you've ever been there, it's a big giant parking lot that runs pollution and stormwater off and brings all the trash and junk into the water. So you can see down here, we've still got great parking, but one of it's green. You got a couple of manufactured wetlands that are buffering the parking lot before that water gets into Long Island Sound, acts as a giant natural filter. We have other places like Alley Creek that we're working with the state down there. They're going to try and do some of the same things. We do a lot of policy work. That's one thing I did not touch on. Is I spend a lot of time at the state legislature advocating for good bills for fish and water and wildlife. We go to DC every year with the Long Island Sound Citizen Advisory Committee, which has stakeholders from New York and Connecticut all around the Sound, and a whole pile of us go down and we meet with all the coastal delegation people in DC to try and maintain funding for Long Island Sound. So all these projects I'm showing you can be funded. We can keep moving forward and keep cleaning up Long Island Sound. And then there's local um, wins like the Restoration Act up here. That Save the Sound played a pretty big role in that. That's really gonna, it's a small tax that people voted to put on themselves to clean up the water in Suffolk County. So it went out to public referendum. So it's not an unfunded mandate. It's up to the people. Do you want clean water? You're gonna have to pay a little bit for it, and it won. So people want to pay to live in a high quality location. Um, all kinds of stuff. We were integral in helping pass a big wetlands law that was changed in New York after 2 decades of trying to get that done. That's the wetlands down there. So we have policy people, we have lawyers, we have scientists, we have people monitoring water quality, we have engineers that go out and take down dams to improve passage for the fish and clean up the rivers. We have over 90 cleanups that we're doing this year through our cleanup coordination folks. We have thousands of volunteers we mobilize for that. It's really a holistic way to approach these problems. And the Soundkeeper is sort of the rogue. Our team is kind of rogues. We have boats. We don't really have a home base. We're zipping around the Sound, responding to people, giving talks over here, going to different legislative priority areas and working on it. And so we have our set programs, and the glue that ties a lot of it together are these Soundkeeper people that bounce around. So we're the only group regionally that does this. There's a lot of fantastic groups. We work with all of them. But with the whole package I just described, we're really the only group that puts it all together for solution generated. That's why our action for the Sound, that's our byline. We want to get stuff done. So we utilize all the tools in the toolbox, and that's what we like to do is make it happen. So I just wanted, there's a lot of you on here that I'm sure I know. I can't see everybody right now, and there's been amazing support over the years. This is my 8th year doing this, and supporting all our new hires and just everything that we're doing here. This final slide is a group of professional divers that I spent 5 days with going around Plum Island, and we were doing biodiversity dives. I wish that was a regular day in the life of a Soundkeeper, was to go diving every day with these folks. But yeah, it's a really diverse job. It's a lot of fun, but we really can't do it without the help of all you folks. So I'll leave it here for a second for questions. I know we have some time left, right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
you have anything in
and
the chat?
yeah, we have well, first of all, Representative Joe Gresco mentioned horseshoe crabs as yet another thing that we've worked on. Thank you, Joe. And Brooks and Elise Lowe asked, you mentioned Cornell, but what other aquaculture programs, high school and college level, are we cooperating with and how?
So I'm scheduling a talk at the Sound School. I'm also on their steering committee. I'm also on the Sea Grant Senior Advisory Board, which oversees how the funding that comes in annually to Sea Grant is directed, and a lot of that is aquaculture related. The eelgrass places I'm working, those are both aquaculture leases that I have agreements from the aquaculture folks on, Chris Walston and Norm Bloom, Bloom and Son, Cops Island Oysters. They provide oysters for our seed on clam, both those groups. We also went out and did last year, for example, we went out and did eelgrass planting with the Bridgeport Aquaculture School. Um, so yeah, we have a lot of interaction with the Milford Lab folks, and also the Bureau of Aquaculture permits all this stuff. So aquaculture is a huge part of what we do. And the person who was the nuisance complainant, which you have to have for a clean water action, you have to show harm from the poor water quality, was the Atlantic Clam Company, which was a shellfish harvester out of Greenwich. So yeah, aquaculture is heavily integrated in this, and actually that's kind of how it started because between the lobster die off and then you get the shellfish beds get shut down if there's bacteria. So none of the aquaculture folks want anything to do with sewage in the water. They're very, very strong on that.
Thanks. And we have another question in the chat, and I just want to let folks know too, if you want to use the react button in the toolbar, you can raise your hand and unmute, or feel free to put stuff in the chat and I'll look through the questions and we'll get to as many as we can. And if we have questions that we're not able to get to here, we can always follow up. So the next question we have is, what sewage treatment processes were fixed in Westchester County to improve the sound?
Yeah, so right now, it's the identification of the problems, and there's always ongoing fixes. So the first step was to get everybody to do an inventory of their system, and you can do that by such things as pressurizing your pipes and seeing where you're losing pressure. That means you have a crack in a collection pipe. Um, and so that type of stuff is the first thing you need to do. And there are tens of thousands of defects that were detected through that lawsuit. And then what we do, David Ansel is director of our water quality program, and he's really been ramping up our presence in Albany. And part of it is getting money for the fixes. So in order for a sewage treatment plant to be able to upgrade, they need it's millions of dollars. And I would say, I don't know how many billions have been spent. It's got to be 4 or 5 billion or more now between Connecticut and New York to get the water quality improvements we have. There's water infrastructure funding that is really critical, and also the state revolving loan fund. We lobby at DC for that because that's getting cut also under the current budget negotiations. So yeah, there's specific pipes and things do get fixed, but there's a lot of them. So the main thing for our lawsuit was just identifying and defining the problem.
Thanks. And we have a great article about it in a recent newsletter too. Amanda, if you're able to find a link to that one and post it in the chat, that would be great. And Friends of the Bay, you have a question? You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Bill. Christine here. Good to see you. You
Oh,
guys are
hey, yeah.
doing awesome work. Quick question. So back a bunch of slides when you were talking about tips that you get or alerts of people that are detecting issues. It looked like you had something around our area circled. I was just curious what that was. That you had like a map up and it looked like you had kind of like down around either Huntington or Oyster Bay, there was like a red circle around it. I was just curious what that might have.
Oh, no, that is an area where we have not completed the outfall mapping.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So, and a lot of your groups already have those maps,
Hmm.
right? You know where all the pipes are. So, and also Cornell was contracted to do all the mapping out in Suffolk County. And so what we do first is we send out a Freedom of Information Act to the municipality. And then we get those, and hopefully they're not old as-built and they come in a GIS format, so we can just put them on the GIS. And
Right.
then we just haven't mapped that area. But then what we'll do is do our on-the-ground surveys, and then we overlay what we actually see to what is permitted under the municipal stormwater permit. It's called an MS4 permit,
Right.
and not all the pipes are public stormwater pipes. So we're going to try and figure out how they fit into the MS4. And then we're going to set up a stratified random sample. So as we drive around, instead of just driving around looking for pollution, we'll say, hey, we're going to test 4 pipes today. We'll run it through a random number generator and say, hey, this is our location. And we'll go take spot checks on pipes and then bring them back to the lab. That makes sense?
Yeah, so are you at this point like waiting for that information from the township of where the pipes are, or are you guys actually going to
Some
go
of
out
them,
and
yeah.
okay.
We're now that we're staffed back up again, we're gonna reinitiate that because the people working on it, we had some turnover. So we've been working on it for a few years. So what we're doing is taking a picture of this of the culvert, how close you can get with a boat. You need a kayak to get to it, what kind of culvert it is, or outfall pipe. And then we'll once we have it totally mapped, I think it's gonna be another year or two, then we're gonna initiate that. And then, yeah, we'll work with all the unified water groups and see if there's some way we can, save a boat trip.
Yes.
Because you guys do
I
that
was
anyway, right?
was
You
gonna
guys
say give
test
us a
all.
call when you guys are in this area. We'll definitely help
Yeah,
out with that.
yeah. No, we have a lot of people over there. Friends of Oyster Bay, Hempstead, Manhasset Protection, the Talkit, Harbor Protection people. Yeah, there's a lot of groups over there we're working with.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. And then in the chat, we have a few more. Angelina De Benedict asked, how have federal cuts to EPA and other environmental programs impacted your work? I'm imagining some data or funding loss. Are there any concerns you have, especially considering climate impacts? It's a big
Um,
question.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, a big concern for me is we need long-term data sets. As a scientist, the more data you have, the longer period you have it for, the more confident you can be in the trends and making statements on it. And so, decommissioning the Earth satellites is really kind of frightening to me. I believe is unwarranted. I will say that we met with Lee Zeldin, who's now a director of the EPA this summer when we were down in DC. And he has, at least for Long Island Sound geographic program funding, he has maintained that. And the Maritime Aquarium and Cornell and others are spearheading the lobster funding, and that some of that's federal, and that has not yet been affected. It's wait and see. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. A lot of my funding is private, so I'm independent of that. More dependent on the state of the economy, based on what people can donate to help us out. So there may be an indirect cost there, maybe not. We'll just have to see. We've been through this before, and we were able to maintain the funding levels. But I do know certain areas and other waterkeeper groups have definitely ended up with some cuts. And this is just year one, so I'm not sure how it's going to play out. And I will say one thing that has impacted us is we worked very hard in the state of Connecticut and had the most public outreach, including the Attorney General's office during a public hearing in Mystic based on the river herring. There's a thing called an Amendment 10, and that was designed to help the river herring conservation within the Atlantic herring fishery. That was put on pause because of a executive order called Making America Seafood Great Again. And that redirected staff to some other tasks, and they that were forced to knock, I believe, 4 projects, including our Amendment 10 for the herring, to the back burner. So that's been delayed.
Thanks, Bill. Daniela is wondering if we offer paid internships for college students.
Yes, we have a number of our programs have internships, and we typically pay. That's really the best way for people to get started in this field. It's very competitive. So, going in and getting an internship, one, seeing if you really want to do this type of work, and then two, showing that you'll do it for a little bit of money goes a long way to start building up your career. I was a AmeriCorps volunteer, or similar to AmeriCorps, out in California, working on the Klamath River before the dams got pulled down, doing salmon habitat restoration in the 90s. And yeah, I think I made $8.70 a day. And then after that, I graduated from college and went right into the Peace Corps, where I was making, what was it, $185 a month to live off of. So if you're going to do this work, you got to be prepared to pay your dues for several years when you're younger, because it sounds romantic, right? So a lot of people want to do it. It is a lot of hard work, and you got to really have a lot of dedicated people to do it, because it's not a very, it's not a lucrative career choice, but it's a very satisfying career choice. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely. And we do list our available internship positions. They throughout the year, I'd say keep checking back, because if there's something not listed right now, a month from now there could be. So throughout the year we list them on our website, and we also list ongoing volunteer opportunities as well. And then Tim Hopkins, I've observed eelgrass areas identified on my Garmin while boating in Fisher's Island Sound. Do you monitor these?
Yeah, so we don't monitor those because there's a fantastic group out on Fisher's Island, and they're the ones that got the funding for the Planet satellite flyovers, and they had extra flight time. That's why we're able, for our big experiment with the clam method, to utilize 3 satellite flights. So they're also doing something else that's really interesting is, and I wrote a support letter for this. They have installed an eco mooring. So if you look at some of the photos, like a standard mooring has got a weight and a chain, and it spins around with the tide, and you can fly over eelgrass beds in mooring fields, and there are big circles where the chain has ripped up all the eelgrass. Also, when people go into those areas and they drop an anchor and then they retrieve it, they rip up a bunch of eelgrass. So what the conservancy there, the eelgrass folks there are piloting is a buoy that goes up and down more instead of sweeps. And they're going to see if they're safe for boats, how long they last, what kind of maintenance, if it's a viable option. And then the goal is to go into these areas that are frequented by boaters that want to anchor up but have eelgrass, but have these moorings set up so people can hook up, have their picnic, whatever they want to do, but they're not causing any damage to the eelgrass beds. So we do work closely with them. There's a big eelgrass consortium that's just been started through the Connecticut National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is also a new uh, uh, entity that's part of a national entity. I believe it was the 50th one, and they keep long-term water quality data, and they are housed at Yukon Avery Point, where the marine science folks are, and so they're part of this whole eelgrass monitoring that includes water quality, the sizes of the beds, how they grow and shrink with climate over time. But yeah, the Fisher's Island is our Alamo. That's where all the eelgrass is. Some of the seeds we get are from the little dumpling islands, and that's part of Fisher's Island Sound. So really, Fisher's Island is going to be the repository for seeds to restore Long Island Sound. So it's incredibly important to monitor it. Good question.
Okay, Beverly has a question here about um, your opinion of the status of the West Haven water pollution site. She wrote, I've sat in on the commission as a citizen and would like your opinion if you have one.
Yes. Last year, we started doing some testing. With the health department down there. And then like I said, we just got staffed up at the beginning of the summer here. So what I'd really like to do is continue working with them, we've over the years we've tested a lot of those pipes and we've responded. We've been down there when there's been big sewer line breaks. They have really good leadership now in West Haven. The new mayor used to be up in Hartford. Dorinda Borer was instrumental in increasing the Clean Water Fund, which provides dollars to upgrade those sewage treatment plants. And West Haven's and definitely needs some of those dollars to upgrade its whole system. I know, or I heard that there's a pump station. You could smell it the last time I was down there. That's slated to be fixed if they haven't already started construction. That was definitely one of the causes there. But we've tested it frequently. It's been clean a lot of the time, but we have had some bad situations. And not always the most congenial relationship with the wastewater treatment plant folks, but understandably, we're telling people to fix things, but they need money to do it. So we really try to work on the legislative side to provide those resources so the towns, especially the ones that don't have a big pot of money to draw on, they can access those funds from the state and the federal government.
Thanks. Iris has a great comment here. The Save the Sound cleanup report and infographic was really interesting. Thanks for putting those together. The report highlights specific debris that's picked up, like plastic straws. But I was curious if Save the Sound posted data of the different waste collected. When I went to one of the cleanups, I used the paper data sheet, and there were quite a few categories that we could record. Thank you. I'll jump in here with a quick comment that I know that we've had posts and a little information in the reports that we put out about some of the wildest things we've come across, maybe like a top 10 list of some of the funniest things we found as part of the cleanups. And we do track all of the data with that through a CleanSwell app. We have staff and intern positions working on recording all of the data collected at cleanups. Bill, do you want to jump in on that with anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure. I haven't checked that part of the website lately, but yeah, I think we need to make sure that we're updated on there because we do tabulate all that. And the reason that's extremely important is because we do try and do a lot of work with the waste and single-use plastics up in, excuse me, Hartford. And for example, the plastic bag ban, when that went into effect, it was rescinded temporarily for COVID, but we recorded a decrease in plastic bags on the beaches. So when you pass a law, you can see a change. I know Representative Gresco worked extremely hard on the bottle bill and was a proponent of that. And part of that was getting a fee on nips. So those have a 5 cent deposit on them that's paid back to municipalities, supposed to be used for cleanups. I have not seen the latest data to see if the the new 10-cent deposit on the bottles has decreased our finding cans and bottles on the beach and including some of the other like Gatorade and that kind of thing. So that's a great question. And that's what I mean by long-term data collection. If we have all this data, it is tabulated, it is summarized. We need to make sure that it's available to the public, but you can see how our actions and our politicians' representation can improve those numbers through policy.
Thanks. And we're nearing 1 o'clock. And does anyone have a final question or would people like to share any comments before we close out for the afternoon?
I guess if there's no other question coming in, I will address Joe's comment on the horseshoe crabs. I just want to draw folks' attention to a press release from the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk. They did an independent survey of 4 or 5 data streams that show a really steep decline in horseshoe crabs. And again, thanks to Joe, he's got his hands in a lot of this stuff, obviously. He led the charge on restricting and banning harvest of horseshoe crabs for bait in Connecticut over a few years' effort. And the issue is now it's not banned on the New York side. and their data from Sacred Heart University Project Limulus that shows the crabs go back and forth between Connecticut and New York based on tag data. So Joe and some others, and mainly led by folks on Long Island, are working on a ban in New York is passed the House and the Senate, or the Assembly and the Senate in New York. There may need to be some revisions to it, but it has not been signed by the governor. And the governor vetoed it last year. So this year we're hoping to potentially scale it down to Long Island Sound instead of all in New York, and have a meeting with the governor soon. And then we'll have full protection for Long Island Sound. And the reason I think that's important is the crabs on the outside of Long Island can escape into the ocean. The crabs inside Long Island are stuck in this warming body of water, and they're under a lot of pressure from a lot of people. So I think that actually makes some sense.
Thanks. And Amanda shared a link in the chat if anyone wants to read more about horseshoe crabs in our spring sound bites issue. And thank you
Oh,
all for
wait.
taking, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, I forgot. The mandatory hat and handout. So we have a matching fundraiser right now. So we have a generous donor that'll match every dollar that's donated. So like 25 bucks becomes 50 bucks. So if you're interested in any of these programs, you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you want to support us in any way that you could afford, you can go onto our website, and there's a place where you can log in and do this donation. And that's a great picture of the eelgrass under the boat. So that Duck Island out of Westbrook, that's one of our big restoration efforts there.
Okay, and Amanda just included that link in the chat as well. And thank you all for joining us on your lunch hour. And thank you, Bill, for sharing so much about the work you do. I know you have a million stories, so thanks for sharing a few of them. And Allison and Nico, thanks for joining us as well as part of the team. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.